My boy got robbed. Hello everyone, it is Tuesday, I am Tuesday, and today we are going to talk about Dark Heir, Book 2 in the Dark Heir trilogy written by C.S. Pacat. More specifically, we will be examining Sarcean and Will as characters in the series in order to learn more about the world in which they live. Obviously it's going to contain spoilers, but this is a character deep dive for the middle child of a trilogy. You expected that. The one thing you might not expect is the fact that I won't be talking about this guy essentially at all throughout the course of the video. This was originally supposed to be an examination of Elizabeth, Cyprian, Will, and James, but the section on Will/Sarcean took up over half of the script, so I switched gears and dedicated this video to just them. I do still plan on filming the other half of this, so to speak, but how quickly that occurs is entirely up to you. Just let me know you want to see it by hitting the like button and telling me down in the comments below, alright? Otherwise, I'll probably just pull it up 6 months from now whenever I run out of ideas again. Much like the threat that it represents in the story, the Dark King begins to grow ever-present within the reader's mind as the tale moves forward. As we descend deeper into the ruins of his palace, we begin to be consumed by the mystery and the danger he represents, much in the same way Will does. We fear Sarcean, or at least we are told to fear Sarcean, but we don't exactly know a whole lot about him, and are given just enough to want to learn more. As such, you may find yourself beginning to wonder who or what the Dark King actually is, and while that answer is complicated, it took about 8 pages for me just to lay out my theory, the wider implications of answering that question become world-shaking for the trilogy at large. With that being said, the short answer to my question is this. The Dark King is exactly who his enemies say he is. He made war against the Sun Kingdom and the forces of light, was killed by the Lady while ending the old world, and vowed to return someday in the future. However, it is the context of these actions that completely rewrite our understanding of both Sarcean and Will, and the roles they play within the story. Buckle up, because this one's gonna be a bit of a roller coaster. Okay, I want you to think about something for a second. Have you noticed anything strange about how Sarcean is portrayed? I have. All of the stories we are told about him are from the perspective of his enemies. All of the flashbacks we get reveal more about the character of those in the Sun Palace than of Sarcean, and that strikes me as just a little bit off, don't you think? Here's what we know. Sarcean worked as a sort of spymaster general for the Sun King. He and Vander had a thing, and then he boned the Lady of Light before dipping out of the palace for an undetermined amount of time. Regardless, Sarcean does return at the behest of the Lady, only to be betrayed by her and Anharian, cast into the oubliette by the Sun King, and rescued by Vander. Sarcean kills one of his former allies in his escape, which disturbs Vander to no end, and then dips out of the palace again for the last time until he eventually conquers it. Now, you might be asking yourself what this little history lesson has to do with Will Kempen being the hero of this story, and don't worry, I'll get to that, but we have to dip into some corkboard and red string territory before we do. Vander remembers the war. He recalls the cities he called home being choked with the smoke of battle, great winged beasts flying above the clouds intent on bringing destruction to all he holds dear. He remembers people cowering in their homes in the hope of surviving just one more night of curfew. He hated the war. Hated especially the forces he fought against which perpetuated it, and above all hated Sarcean for what he had done to Vander's homeland. Seems pretty reasonable, right? Seems like Sarcean is a super ultra not cool pretty bad dude, but what if I told you Vander's memory was a lie? A red herring propagated by the narrative in order for you to feel horror at the imaginings of Will's past life. We have to remember that Vander's perspective is uniquely biased against Sarcean and anything the Dark King might say or do because of both the history between them and Vander's political position within the Sun Kingdom. Consider that Vander despises humans because, lest you have forgotten, he isn't one of them. It hasn't been outright said what the old world beings were in the novels, and I doubt it will be, but it's giving more ancient fairy court than hyper-advanced magical proto-humans, and this is backed up by pretty much all of Visander's point of view chapters. The point is, he has a certain superiority complex that, combined with the fact he is a general for the side of light, and thus has some pretty hefty shaders on, creates an extremely biased perception of anyone he considers to be his enemies. God, I mean, the light is on his side after all, so how could he ever be wrong? We need to go deeper. There are certain contradictions within the Sun King which cannot be ignored if we are to attempt to understand both Sarcean and Will. He is not named. We do not know his face, but we are aware of the fact that he is seen as a paragon of goodness, fighting evil and upholding the light with the power of his word. He exists as the perfect overlord, using his kindness and honor to shepherd his people into a great and prosperous future. So if any of that were true, why would he need a spymaster general? It is said that he has godly powers, that he and the lady would be able to rule with their magic alone, but then where does the Shadow Chalice come from? Why would someone with pure of heart and ultimate authority be the first to drink from a cup which offers him even more power from one of his enemies? Why is the oubliette centered in the throne room? What did he have Sarcean do at his directives in the darkness? The unicorn Devon basically refers to humans as a scourge which has choked the lungs of the world. Visander despises them with a burning passion. There is no reference to them in Will's flashbacks, but we know they exist because of how Visander thinks of them. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, freeing us from our shackles and dooming himself to an eternity of hatred and torment. From everything we have seen, the Sun Kingdom is powerful but exclusionary. It allies itself with unicorns, sure, but come on, man. That's the quintessential purest of pure mythical creatures right there. It kinda tracks with the Sun King's whole deal. In contrast, Sarcean is able to find allies pretty much everywhere. He has common craftspeople and tradesmen willing to die for him, friends who are willing to carry on his vision after he is dead. And Sarian changes sides at some point, and I don't think he did it because of the collar. He has lions and basilisks working for him, all the lesser beasts of the world. Hell, it's even his powers that give the stewards, who are humans, their strength. Remember when Mrs. Duval kept going on about assembling the allies, just like in the days of old? Yeah, I don't think back in the day that allyship was assembled to fight against Sarcean, if you know what I'm saying. Which starts to feed into my pet theory about what Sarcean actually represents. As with any story that examines a mythical past, we enter into the realm of deific beings whenever we discuss the old world of the Dark Rise trilogy. The Sun King exists as a god. Yes, but a god of what exactly? Is it a god of light and purity? No, the lady is more akin to a goddess of light and magic. What about a god of warriors, holding host to those of immense martial prowess? Well, also no. That role would be filled by the likes of Sarian or Visander, though I would argue that Visander fills more of a demigod role than anything. Rather, the Sun King fulfills the role of God King, not a creator per se, but more a figurehead of immense and ill-defined power who acts as the grand arbiter of the status quo within the heavens. He exists at the pinnacle of a tiered hierarchy. His kingdom stands above the rest. His courtiers are more lavish and beautiful than anyone else. And from what we can tell by the attitudes of his followers, this godlike being sees humans as inferior. In contrast, look at Sarcean. I think it would be reductive to label him as the god of shadow or trickery. That is a label assigned to him by the denizens of the Sun Kingdom as a result of Sarcean's station. Instead, I would say that much like the difference between Lorcan and Shore, I'm just making the reference. I promise I won't get into Elder Scrolls lore in this video. We would be here all day. Sarcean seems to represent something much different to those who are not perpetually disposed towards disliking him. Sarcean seems to represent the small things, the unseen things, the things that are forgotten and abhorred. Much like those who live outside the palace, the powers that be see Sarcean as a necessary aspect towards the operation of their splendor, but either hate him quietly or ignore the realities he represents. They cannot hold their power without the unseen work he completes, despite it being anachronistic to their national ethos. Therefore, in the Sun King's court of infinite light, Sarcean seems to hold the same vitriol as humans. What do you mean, what, Raymond? How do you not get... You're reading the script! It doesn't make sense, but... Fine. I'm saying that in this pantheon I've set up, Sarcean is the god of humans, okay? I mean, technically he's the god of all the unseen things, but humans are the most important in the argument I'm making, so let's just focus on that. He alone is the one who cleared the path for the possibility of human ascendancy. His powers were the ones that brought the old world low, leveling the playing field with heaven in order to allow the human realms to grow. He was the one who provided stewards with their strength, despite their whinging otherwise. And his were the champions who could keep his powers in check if they ever were to run rampant. Don't you find it strange that Rassilon is hated by history, and yet his is the shield that can actually touch and kill shadows? We cannot forget, both Sarcean and Will are immensely loyal to the people they ally themselves with. Additionally, we cannot forget they both expect the same from their allies, to the point that it actively fucks them over on multiple occasions. I could talk about Will telling Violet to keep Ecthalion, but I'm more interested in Sarcean's return to the Sun Palace at this moment. He knows the lady is going to betray him when he goes there. He doesn't expect Anharion to, but understands it as a possibility, and yet he goes anyway, simply because they had been allies to each other before, and she had given him no reason to stop treating her as such. It is as if Sarcean needed to go and see the lady despite knowing she would betray him, because he needed her to betray him in order for him to see her as an enemy. From what context we get, it does not seem like Sarcean makes war against the Sun Kingdom until he is betrayed, the first step of which is being captured by the people he once called friends by meeting the lady in the garden. From this, we can assume he still loves them, our friends, and more, even as their views of him have turned to hatred. So, he plans his contingencies in case they do what he knows they will, and enacts them after their betrayal, killing one of his most loyal followers while in the oubliette and escaping into the foothills. Now, this first violent act may seem monstrous on the face of it, and it usually would be, but this apparent betrayal actually isn't too big of a deal when examined critically. Remember a few paragraphs ago when I said Sarcean's followers were willing to die for him, and he had friends willing and ready to enact his vision even in the event of his demise? Yeah, both of those things happen. One of Sarcean's entire armies kills themselves because they capital K no. They will be resurrected in the future. The lady kills Sarcean, and he still technically ends up winning the war. This can only be possible if there is an innate trust between the followers and the leader. The commitment they have to each other is unbreakable even through time. So, when Sarcean stabs one of his most loyal followers in the darkness of their shared prison, it is presented as something horrifying to the sensibilities of the light, but should be understood as something both necessary and acceptable within the confines of the story. It is Visander who reacts to this scene with vitriol, a being of light and privilege and exclusion who does not understand the grimy, sometimes underhanded things the little people must do in order to survive. He bemoans it as an act against goodness while being blissfully unaware of his own prejudicial opinions on the unworthy. His is a perspective of naivete, and Sarcean's is a knowledge of nuance. Once again, the Dark King is named as such because he assembles a coalition of those who are left out of the Sun King's light. The humans, the lions, the basilisks, and all the other small beasts doomed to live in the shadow of the Sun King's exclusionary brilliance. How do we know this? Because Will is Sarcean. And when the shit hits the fan and the world is about to end, who is the only one attempting to promote unity? Will Kempen. Violet comments as much. While Visander promotes petty squabbles and bemoans ancient grievances, while Cyprian parades around his self-righteous adherence to morality as the world starts to burn, as Elizabeth yells out devil and witch and traitor with all the vitriol of a congressman in Montana, and Tom starts chomping at the bit at the idea of killing the last of the stewards, it is Will alone who is attempting to gather allies and save the world. And everyone in the room wants to crucify him for it. Will Kempen is the hero of this story because he's the only one who doesn't give a shit where you came from. Oh, you're the younger sister of the man who tried to kill me? Come along, you're gonna be my best friend. Guy who fundamentally distrusts me upon first meeting and has spent his entire life training to kill me? You're a hard-nose, but that just means you'll be better at directing military matters and logistics than I could. You're great. Top student of the old woman I implicitly lied to via omission, who has probably figured out all of my secrets and just isn't telling anyone for some reason. You're gonna be the person I go to for esoteric wisdom and sage advice. Guy who's done nothing but try to kill me and despises what I supposedly did to him 10,000 years ago. I want to do nothing but make sure that you don't get hurt again. Also, most of these people kind of distrust each other, frequently, to varying degrees throughout the story. Disparate forces follow in Will's footsteps because despite their differences, they believe in the vision he sets out for them. It is a vision of peace and unity that is concerned with the well-being of the masses as opposed to the consolidation of power. Why? Because Will never wanted this, and I don't think Sarcean did either. He is powerful, but power was never something he sought out. Rather, it was thrust upon him by birth, fate, history, and circumstance when all Will really wanted was to be loved. Instead, he is hated. As a result of the mythos built around him, multiple forces want to kill him for the simple act of being alive, and yet he does not falter in his attempts to make the world a better, safer, and brighter place to be. He controls shadows, true, but the baggage involved with that statement might make you forget that Will controls them. They are a powerful tool which, left unchecked, could and are actively destroying the world come the end of Dark Heir, but that's because they've been released without a safeguard. It's like the difference between a well-maintained nuclear reactor and the H-bomb test at Bikini Atoll. It would certainly take a great hero to be able to rein that in. With all of that in mind, I think a very different picture begins to be painted of both Will and Sarcean. We have already been given every reason to believe this is not a good versus evil story. There's a lot more going on under the hood when examined critically. So why should the big bad villain be any different in that context? In order to cap off my point, I will leave you with one question while reminding you of a principle known as the economy of characters. In the darkest of days, on the blackest of nights, when the light of the world has been all but snuffed out and the stewards finally make their call to the prophesied king who will return to save them, who do you really think is going to answer that call?